Presented by your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local. Go with a home team.
And good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home. Save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. For the last hour and a half, we've been talking about Mike Leach, sharing stories, among other things. He's in critical condition at UMC Hospital in just right down the road from here in Jackson, Mississippi. He had a health issue yesterday morning in Starkville. They transferred him to UMC. As y'all know, we're about 2 hours from Starkville, Mississippi. And that is all according to Director of Public Affairs at Mississippi State, Sid Salter. And we're all, waiting on news, hopefully good news, of some kind of a recovery for Mike Leach. We had Steve Robertson on earlier, close to Mike Leach, covered Mike Leach, 247 Sports. He does not expect Coach Mike Leach to coach again. He's just hoping and praying that he regains faculties and so on and can live a healthy life in the Keys. We're going to transition here a little bit and welcome in Tom Luginbill, who's known Mike Leach for a long time, and national college football analyst with ESPN, and also played quarterback at Georgia Tech, coached in the pros, so on. And Lugs has been with ESPN for almost 20 years on TV. You saw him last night on the Capital One Bowl preview. And, of course, in studio in Charlotte and running their recruiting and so on. But I want to talk about the impact that Coach Mike Leach has had on the game of football and the air raid and the concepts and how all these guys are running maybe some variation, modified, blah, 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 of the air raid. And Tom Luginbill, when was the first time you met the Pirate?
Probably, let's see, my second or third year at ESPN. So this would have been back in, maybe 06, 07. And man, what a national treasure, right? And I think that one of the things that I've always loved and appreciated about him is he's not consumed with football. He has so many other interests outside of the game. And so many in this sport, particularly in the coaching profession, are consumed and addicted to the game. And I think the fact that he has other interests and he enjoys other parts of his life is really healthy. I mean, you kind of wish more coaches would take on that approach, but they don't. And, to look at the influence, I think you could make an argument, Bo, that, and again, Hal Mumme deserves a lot of this credit as well. But outside of when the true wishbone triple option was at the height of its popularity, the air raid system probably revolutionized offensive football more so than any other scheme that's come into play over the last 35 to 40 years. And you look at what it's morphed into. You look at all of the people, all of the branches and the tentacles that break off of it, whether it's Dana Holgerson or Art Briles or Lincoln Riley, Mike Gundy. The list goes on and on and on. And look at what offensive football has become in college football and where it was born. And I think that just tells you how big of an impact he's had. And I think the other thing that's kind of cool too, Bo, a lot of people don't realize he's not a quarterback guy. He's not a receiver guy. He's an offensive line coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's an offensive line coach. I love that too.
Yeah. When I was reading the book Swing Your Sword, and it talked about how he was the offensive line coach at Iowa Wesleyan and Valdosta State. And then eventually, as you know, as he and Mumme moved up, he became offensive coordinator and the things happened at Kentucky. But you know this, Lugs, you and I are the same age. When we were growing up, most everything was 3 yards in a cloud of dust. except out west where you were, this
The
guy named
one-back
Lavelle
offense.
Edwards was doing amazing things at BYU with Steve Young and Todd Detmer and Jim McMahon and Robbie Bosco.
Yep.
And smart, quirky Mike Leach was an undergrad there. And I think that's where he caught the bug on so many of these concepts, Luch.
Oh, there's no question. The Lavelle Edwards influence, the Norm Chow influence. Andy Reid was a GA there. Mike Holmgren. There's so many guys that go back to that world of offensive football, and then it just broke off into all these other little ideas. And he's so fascinating to talk to because there's no front. You could ask him a question at the podium or ask him a question privately in his office, and the answer would be exactly the same with probably the same tone. And that's refreshing in today's climate, in my opinion. So, yeah, I mean, you go back, and I'm glad you referenced the old BYU days, because you had what Lavelle and those guys were doing, which was somewhat of an offshoot of Sid Gilman and the Air Coryell years. And then you started to get into what became the 3 receiver, 1 back, inside, outside zone, counter tray offense, which was like the Dennis Erickson at Idaho thing that they were doing. And then it went to Wyoming and Washington State and then eventually to Miami and really spread like wildfire right around the same time that the air raid concepts were kind of taking off at some of the lower levels of college football before it reached Lexington, Kentucky.
Tom Luginbill on the Yuengling Lager guest line. We're talking about the unbelievable impact that Mike Leach has had on the game of football. He gets a law degree from Pepperdine, and then he takes the Iowa. He talked about this, and I've had dinner with him and so on. But I think Sharon thought, hey, I'm marrying a guy, and he's going to go to work for a law firm, and eventually we're going to make like a ton of money. And he goes to Pepperdine Law School, and he takes the Iowa Wesleyan job for $3,000 a year, and has to have a part-time job on top of that in the off season, Luke.
Yeah, the money eventually came, though, didn't it?
It did. It did.
It just took a little while longer, and it is. It's just interesting when you kind of get that bug, and it's something you enjoy that you like, and I kind of what I kind of do is I kind of look at his educational background is kind of part of what I referenced earlier. The variety of different interests he has away from football and how educated he is in a variety of different things. It's unique. You don't see a lot of that really anywhere at the coaching profession and really at any level.
We talk about you're a coach's son, and we talk about the ebb and flow of being a coach. And, we're in this space right now where we don't know what's going to happen with Coach Leach, and everybody hopes he recovers. Most people believe coaching, again, is off the table, even if he recovers. But talk a little bit about what could be going through the minds of the assistant coaches and the players, because the show must go on. It's a multi-million-dollar SEC football program, and they've got recruiting, bowl practice, bowl game, and Zach Arnett has been named interim head coach. Tom?
Well, the focus is always going to be on what's in front of you and what you can control, all right? Not a coach, not an administrator, not a player, not a trainer, not an equipment staff member can do anything but control and help focus on what they are there to do, and that is to go to class, go to practice, prepare for a bowl game. Because if you spend, obviously that's not saying that there aren't heavy hearts in Starkville there, and within that building, of course there are. But Mike Leach would probably tell his entire football team and that coaching staff, you can't do anything about me right now, but you can help this team get better. You can help this team win another football game. You can help this team focus on what's in front of them. That's got to be the message throughout the entire building.
Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. Luke, we're going to switch gears here to the college football playoff. Y'all did a big bowl show last night at ESPN, you and Dan Mullen. Talk a little – let's start with the Georgia-Ohio State game. I think everybody has counted Ohio State out because of their second-half performance against Michigan. They dominated Michigan in the first half, and then they got dominated in the second half, and that's kind of all we remember, but this is a damn good football team. So Georgia is the overwhelming favorite in this college football playoff. How does Ohio State make this a game, Luke's?
Well, number one, they can't make the mistakes they made versus Michigan, and they were very stubborn in their defensive approach versus Michigan. They wouldn't back off. They kept playing zero. They kept playing cover one. They were trying to challenge Michigan, and Michigan answered the toll, and didn't make the mistakes that Ohio State made. I really think this game's going to come down to whether or not Ohio State on offense can control the line of scrimmage, because they're going to be playing a defensive front unlike anything they've seen all year long. And Ohio State, if they can control the line of scrimmage, not just in the run game, but the ability to create play-action pass and give C.J. Stroud time to throw the ball downfield, that's gonna be critical, because the one thing with Ohio State and C.J. Stroud is he's not a runner, right? So you're Georgia right now, and you're saying, okay, we can play 11 on 10, because if we get in his face, get him off platform, it's not like we're having to take on Bryce Young that can take the front door and, run it, 40 yards and make three people miss on the way. I think that actually gives Georgia some advantages, especially if Ohio State struggles up front on the offensive side of the ball. I think Ohio State will play pretty well. I think defensively they're going to have to change it up some. I don't think that they can take the same approach they took versus Michigan. But to me, this comes down to whether or not C.J. Stroud can throw the ball into tight windows with people in his face. Because I wouldn't be surprised, and I said this last night on the show, I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia takes the same approach versus Ohio State that they took versus Tennessee.
Yeah.
And they just line up and they say, okay, we're going to press all of your receivers at the line of scrimmage. We're not going to let you get a free release off the ball. And we're going to see if C.J. Stroud can throw the ball into very tight windows with people in his face when guys aren't running wide open. And Georgia's got the talent and the confidence to play with that type of mindset.
So do you expect eventually Georgia big by double digits, or Ohio State can run this thing into, 5-6 minutes left to go in the game within a possession?
Yeah, I think this is a fourth quarter game. I really do. I think Ohio State's talented enough for it to be. Again, I think when you have teams with these types of athletes, execution is just going to come at a premium. There's such a small margin for error for both teams. And so then the kicking game comes into play, all right? And field position comes into play. All of these little things that maybe when you're superior in talent to the opponent don't play as big a role because maybe the game's never all that tight, all of a sudden play a big role. And so to me, it could be a battle of attrition, if you will.
How does Ohio State and Jim Knowles, and everybody's only thinking about that second half where McCarthy and them torched them for those, 4 plays over 140 yards, and then the game got out from underneath Ohio State. How does Ohio State disrupt Stetson Bennett, who really hasn't had any pressure, much to any pressure this year, Tom?
Well, I think they're going to have to change it up significantly. Again, I did not like the approach. I think I referenced on your show after the Michigan-Ohio State game that Urban Meyer hit the nail on the head at halftime with his analysis when he said Ohio State's going to have to change it up. They need to back out of this cover 1 and cover 0 stuff because Michigan's going to break one and there's going to be nobody left at the second level. And he was right. It happened twice in the fourth quarter, and it cost Ohio State the game late in that game. So in order for them to try and create some havoc, I think they got to take a similar approach to how they defended Penn State all right? Simulated pressures, not always giving Stetson Bennett in that offensive line a beat on where pressure may be coming from, filtering the gaps in the A gap on both sides of the center, and then dropping out zone pressures, zone blitzes. If they continue to just keep it at a cover zero where it's man-to-man across the board, nobody in the middle of the field, or cover one, where the middle of the field's closed with a high safety and you're playing man-to-man across the board, you're making it too easy on the pre-snap read. Force Georgia to have to make post-snap adjustments.
Okay, so let's go to Michigan TCU. Two phenomenal quarterbacks, Lugs. And McCarthy's got some wiggle and mobility in his game that Harbaugh has not had. And, boy, I thought he played. I mean, golly, when you look at what he did against Maryland, Penn State, Purdue, and Ohio State when they really needed it, the guy came up big. Are you expecting a close one with Michigan TCU in the other semifinal game?
I am. This is kind of like I would like to have some type of an upset pick. This is my upset pick. I think TCU's got better players across the board than people think they do. They've got their quarterback's first team All Big 12, their running back's first team All Big 12, one of the best receivers in the country, Quentin Johnson, first team All Big 12. And here's the most important thing. Their two corners could play anywhere in the country, both of them. Hodges Tomlinson and Newton. Those two guys can get in your face and completely lock you down. And I think that TCU is going to feel confident enough at times to say, okay, we're gonna keep the allowable number in the box to defend the run, because if TCU can't stop the run, none of this other stuff matters. But I think they feel good enough with their two corners to feel like that they can have a numbers advantage in the box and really make Michigan have to earn it. That doesn't mean you get as stubborn as Ohio State got. I think that TCU will be smart enough to change it up and make sure that they're not putting themselves at a disadvantage by not having anybody at the back end between the numbers on the field. But TCU, to me, is built for this type of game. They've got a chip on their shoulder. Everybody's doubted them every step of the way. Everybody's going to doubt them leading up right to kickoff. And my only concern for TCU is that Michigan's overall depth eventually takes its toll and they pull away as a result in the second half. But I think that there's a better match of talent between these two teams than people think there is on the surface.
All right, tell me about Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's younger brother.
He's really kind of a clone. You're going to get the same stuff. The run game is inside zone and guard tackle counter. All right, and then everything's going to come off of that. The play action pass is going to come off of that. The quick screen game to the perimeter is going to come off of that. And everything that they're going to do to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers in space sets up the vertical passing game. And again, they're not a drop back team. They're going to move the pocket. The play pass and getting the ball out of your hand quickly is a staple of that offense, but it all comes off play action. It all comes off the zone stuff, inside and outside zone. And like I said, the counter play, they love. Lincoln and Garrett both love the counter play. And that's where Kendre Miller has been really, really good in the run game. I think he's got some similar talents to his brother in the sense that he is an effortless play caller when it comes to timing and just having a knack and a feel for knowing what needs to come next. You don't see this team discombobulated. You don't see them having to call timeout with 3 seconds left on the play clock. They have an idea of what they are, who they are, what they're going to next, and it's boom, boom, boom. And I just think that's something you either have or you don't. Kendall Briles has a little bit of that.
Yeah,
we've seen it with Lincoln. Chip Kelly, maybe as good as there is in college football, and I think Garrett Riley's right up there with him.
Now, if Bryce Young is your number one QB in the 2023 draft, who is Tom Luginbill's number 2 QB out of the group?
Oh boy. That is a really, really tough one. And everybody's going to say, well, it should be CJ Stroud. To be honest with you, I think there's going to be a lot of people take a long look at CJ Stroud and try to figure out why didn't it work for Dwayne Haskins, all right, the late Dwayne Haskins, because I think they're very, very similar players. Obviously, Justin Fields is a completely different type of guy. Why didn't it work for Cardale Jones? And I think C.J. Stroud's a really good player. I really do. I'm not on the Will Levis train at all. I'm just not. I'm going to give you a sneaky good player that I think is so much better than what he's getting credit for from a draft stock standpoint, and that's Jake Haener at Fresno State. I think he's a guy that will continue to rise up people's boards as a player that could be a long-term NFL type of guy.
Okay. I know Hendon Hooker got hurt, but up until then, and look, these guys usually bounce back from knee surgery pretty damn quick. Did he move up? Did he do enough to move up your – because all these are – here's my theory, Lugs. You played the game. You played quarterback at the Power 5 level. But all these guys are system quarterbacks in some way, shape, or form. So I kind of tossed that out the door. Did Hendon Hooker do enough this year to move way up the draft board for Tom Luginbill?
Yeah, he did a lot to move up. I think it started when he took over the starting reins last year and proved that he could be efficient and, more importantly, consistent, because that was the issue with him at Virginia Tech. He was just so streaky. There was never any consistency of performance, and I think that's above and beyond everything else. What he's shown the most is the ability to consistently perform at a high level. Now, listen, from a system perspective, and we've had the air raid conversation and things of that nature. That's not been a quarterback-friendly transition to the National Football League for the vast majority of prospects that have played in it. Now, we've obviously seen Patrick Mahomes have a significant amount of success. We seem to be seeing Geno Smith get a second wind. Jared Goff has his moments. But if you look at all of the Texas Tech guys, all of the Washington State guys, the Baylor guys, the Houston guys, the West Virginia guys, we haven't seen that transition, number one, made seamlessly, or somebody really, truly pan out as a franchise-style player. And fair or unfair, that's going to be heavily scrutinized with a guy like Hendon Hooker when you look at his career prior to arriving at Tennessee.
All right. Well, I've got 30 seconds. Do you expect Alabama to show up?
The first question I'm asking, because that's actually my game, I've got the Sugar Bowl this year.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which players for Alabama decide to play? I think that's a big component to this. And you're right. Maturity is going to be a big thing to look out for. Are they going to perform like they did against Oklahoma and Utah at 2 losses because they're disappointed and they're boo-hooing about not being in the college football playoff? Or are they mature enough to move on and cherish the privilege of playing into the Sugar Bowl?
That's a great point. All right, I'll give you 3 recommendations, restaurants. Irene's, Desi Vegas, and Cafe Atchafalaya. You'll have a great time in New Orleans. We'll talk soon.
There you go, pal. All right, man. Thank you.
Be good. Thanks, Tom Luginbill. The Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Bank Plus, it's more than a name. It's a promise. And all the show today you can watch right now on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports or Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show.